Okay, so you asked me to do something on spirituality,
Yeah.
which is the other side of community, because I see community and spirituality being two sides of the same coin. A community is a matrix of relationships and networks that supports the spiritual life of those creating the resonance of community. And so I put the two together as a way of thinking about the two areas you asked me to think with you all about. And I think of the spiritual life as resonance in a way. And it goes back, to the medieval mystics that talked about God's love and also the unknowing, the via negativa, the way of letting go of all the trappings that we create that keeps us distant from the divine. So just wanted to talk about that and jazz for a second. So first of all, resonance. And I see that as intimacy building, seeking connection. I think at the heart of the spiritual drive of human beings, because it's built into the brain to seek connection, to belong. So it's a community impulse, but it's also a wider impulse. And by that I mean to belong to oneself fully, and to feel at home in one's skin, and to feel at home with others, at home with creation, and then the larger ultimate reality in which, everything resides. And my own sense of that is that love is the pulse of the cosmos. And so to be attuned and have intimacy with that is a connection-making thing. And what makes me think of jazz in that way is jazz is a connection-making kind of enterprise. Connection with the musicians, connection with one's own voice, one's own musicality in the performance. And by that I mean an expression of deep emotion, an expression of who you are as a creative agent. And I'll build on what was said earlier. By that I mean somehow the creative source of the cosmos, which is ongoingly creative, God. And then I participate in that, in the act of creation, like we talked about earlier. So somehow, in the creative, innovative process, I'm participating in the very fabric of a creative, ongoing, divine reality. And for me, that's connection. To feel like I'm a part of that with others, attuned to myself, the larger music of the spheres of the created world, and then with the divine, I can't think of anything more joyful. And it's interesting in the interviews that you know what I mean? I use a little bit of a different language, but it's this connection language, this hunger for intimacy, for resonance. You could say for vibration with others. There are a number of ways to say that, but I think of that as an elemental piece of the spiritual life. And you read it in the medieval mystics, Christian mystics, you see it in Buddhist mindfulness meditation, to be fully present in the moment. So I think it's a kind of human instinct that plays out in the jazz performance that is deeply spiritual. And so spirituality is connection, making attunement with the pulse of the cosmos that vibrates within me, with others, and so forth. I like that as a foundation because that builds into two other features that I see important in spirituality and jazz. One is the dynamic quality. And by that I mean the searching, the vitality, prying open an ever new possibility for thinking differently about a piece of music. It may be a structure, but it's a new way to inhabit that structure, prying open new pathways for creative expression. So it's searching, it's dynamic, there's a restless energy. And what I like about that in a spiritual sense is that kind of environment invites agency and freedom of expression, so which connects with the civil rights, connects with the resilience in African American communities from the horrific slave conditions, the spirituals, the early jazz. You think about the cauldron of urban poverty, these vitalizing expressions of freedom, resilience, agency. And I think of that as the kind of searching, restless searching for something more. And I think the something more is belonging in a kind of freedom, a space where vitality and individuality can emerge in community. So the dynamic quality of jazz is this restless quality that, that continues to pry open a passageway into something more. And I think that resilience, that's empowering, that, you're called into this almost in a jazz performance. And that's community and that's everyday life, living in jazz, which leads to the third quality that I think is so key, and that's the kind of, I'll call it a virtue even, of being open to the unexpected, of being open to being unsettled even. In the searching, there's a space of not knowing. I don't have it yet. I don't possess it. And so that openness is a humility. I don't have all the answers, and I'm open to learning and receiving gifts that may unsettle me, that may provoke transformation in me. And I see that as elemental to jazz, that the musicians are open to one another and thus responsive to one another, and an openness to new experiences in my life that may make me think differently. So the openness to surprise and the unexpected, which is key to developing a kind of hospitable attitude. So that's why hospitality, as we've talked about, is so key to me in that openness. So I think of the hunger for connection, the first idea, and I think of the dynamic searching as the second idea, and this hospitality, this openness to the surprise of the new, the unexpected, which involves humility, generosity, grace, all sorts of things you could say, and fundamentally a trust, which cycles back to me as what I see, a trust in the trustworthiness of things that is rooted in the sense that at the heart of things is love, and that the cosmos vibrates to that pulse, and I name that God. And I see that revealed in Jesus Christ as a Christian. Not exclusively so, because I see rhythms of that elsewhere, because God is a creative God, always creating. But for me, those are some of the spiritual dimensions, and there's a lot of elements in there we could riff with. But first of all, is that somewhat clear? I was sort of riffing on a lot of notes here, trying to be quick and brief, but connection is key, and then the searching piece, and openness, hospitality, which I guess implies respect and kindness. If you don't respect each other on the stage, you're not going to trust each other, and especially when playing with new musicians.
Yeah.
You kind of feel into one another, and you see what emerges.
Well, and that was the beauty of last night. I've seen it over and over and over and over.
Yeah, you witnessed this
but it's really, it's nice when it's someone who has become as dear as you have to me, with two others for whom I have great fondness and respect, and just seeing that. You'll see it when you take a look at the video of the concert. Ken's editing it now, but it was just wonderful stuff.
One piece that what I really like is this openness thing, which goes to the mystics. Meister Eckhart's notion of Gelassenheit, releasement, I guess is one translation, the idea of opening yourself to an unknowing. The further you dive to the depths, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And that the spiritual journey is actually a letting go. So which fits to the jazz performance. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, letting go of the guardrails, releasing control, being vulnerable, I guess, too, but
Yeah.
that really fits. And it's the irony is that in risking that, letting go, I can then belong more fully.
Mm-hmm.
But the perception is often that, no, to really belong, I have to conform and control.
Right.
And do what everybody thinks I should do. And so it's this ironic reversal of what you think it really means to belong.
Mm.
And that real belonging is to have a conversation where you're each yourself and you're each mutually vulnerable and open to unlearning what you thought you'd settled. Yeah, it's like introducing a new scale into a solo. Instead of a C7, suddenly you're imposing diminished chords on it or whatever the and oh yeah, okay, that possibility emerges and you respond to it or whatever. I wonder too, I mean, when I hear your comment about undisciplined, I think that's true in a way. But I wonder if letting go requires rethinking what discipline means. And I heard that in the conversation, that, well, actually, jazz musicians are disciplined in another way, and that people's lives have discipline in a variety of ways. And the Buddhists talk about right intention as one of the Eightfold Path. And I like that term because to have intention is to have focus rather than discipline. I think of discipline sometimes as an externally imposed thing. But what if right intention and focus, yeah, it just opens up the palette. I thought I'd just try that, see how, does that fit with what you're saying, or am I missing the, because I see focus and right intention in a lot of people's lives in different ways that could be recognized as deeply spiritual. And yet, in the way that I might see it.
I think one of the things that Jean Vanier part of his idea of this, or comment about undisciplined was the fact that they're not willing to be accountable to the wider community.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes
so
sense.
important.
That's very.
Because I would say now that you're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I might use the word like alignment. Like I am committed to the well-being of the whole community. I'm using all my agency to work towards the well-being of the whole. I don't know if that resonates.
Well, I
with you
think
guys.
Linda made a comment about that when she was talking about working with her musicians, and she said something to the effect, you can do what you want, but this part and this part we've got to be together on.
Yep.
I guess that's where the individual and the vocals come together again.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, that was kind of
I think
discipline.
that's true. Yeah, it requires accountability, discipline, alignment. That's a good
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the kind of accountability of like serving those in need. I was just looking at that thing.
Yeah.
Service, right?
Yeah.
Being willing to look beyond your own immediate needs, or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
The piece that this has been very helpful, the Jean Vanier reference especially, but that whole piece around thinking about how Jesus dealt with discipline and with the restrictive and constrictive discipline of the Judaism, of the leaders of Israel in his day, and his alternative discipline, which was more the freeing kind of discipline you're talking about, so that it's not discipline whose purpose it is to put you under my control, but it's discipline to align you with the well-being of the cosmos.
Yeah. And the example of that is Jesus' obvious time for prayer,
Mm-hmm.
time for himself, and time to be in public worship.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the gospel writers do have an aside, as was his custom,
Mm-hmm.
about both his time
Yeah.
for private prayer and time alone, and also the fact of being in synagogue
Yeah.
on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Were those external disciplines, or were they internal disciplines?
Yes.
But they were disciplines that contributed to
Right.
his spiritual health.
What I would say is like the difference, or just highlight is looking at the difference between like a free jazz piece versus something that's like fully written out that you're then going to work on. Because sometimes what happens is you actually have more freedom when you really detail that structure. Like I know Bill Evans, when he was rehearsing his band, he would say, we're doing exactly this, then it's a bass solo, then I'm going to take like a few bars here, and you know, he would set it out, and then they would play within that. So I've been working with a tap dancer who just moved here from New York, and what he talks about is slightly different than that kind of structure, but it's he talks about it as like creating a play space. So when you first kind of meet another musician, it's figuring out what is the boundary we're going to play within.
That, yeah,
Yeah.
I like your term play space.
I like it.
Yeah,
It's his
no.
term. Yeah, it's not my words, but yeah. But then I have the sense sometimes that that's the role of a teacher, or a more experienced musician will often be able to meet you in the same play space, but then they'll also be able to kind of pull on the boundary and say, and it sometimes is very uncomfortable, and that's the vulnerability part that you're talking about maybe, but like then you learn how to widen the space that you're in, I think.